right. We have Kurt. You are with CryptoTradersPro.com, and you also host a podcast, right? The Crypto Traders Pro podcast.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
But let's start. Let's get into it. You know, like I scheduled this interview because it's come to a point, I guess, of a boiling point. You know, when just a couple of days ago, and I'm talking about BSV, of course, because you know, this is about Bitcoin and. This Changpeng Zhao, right? This the CEO of Binance just decided to just like unlist the coin. And what are your thoughts on the whole ordeal?
I'm plain and simple. Craig was irritated about what looked like market collusion. It's against the law to call somebody a fraud if they have not defrauded somebody. If you accuse somebody of a crime, obviously you're allowed to accuse someone as a crime. But if you collude to have a group accuse someone of a crime, but then you don't actually charge them with the crime or bring them to court or bring charges, then that clearly falls under defamation. And in a place like the US, it's a little more complicated because we have free speech laws and I can be a jerk and that's acceptable. But in the UK, their laws are a lot more strict. And I think it's funny how this is all played out because Craig was only accusing people of market collusion or collusion to harass him to affect the market. And then guys like CZ from Binance or Jesse Powell from Kraken then colluded to cause him financial harm in the market by delisting Bitcoin SV. And so I think it's sad, but it's humorous at the same time. It's kind of like, it reminds me of, I believe it was Nikita Khrushchev. He was the premier of the Soviet Union. And he said, we're never going to have to fire a shot at the United States. They're going to become communists based on the war that we forced them to have, this Cold War. The Cold War will turn them into communists. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, the United States became a police state as a product of having the Cold War versus the Soviet Union. And I think we're kind of seeing the same thing with these exchanges becoming the villain that Craig was accusing them of being in the first place. And I think a week ago there was argument that like, no, you know, like exchanges just want to make money. They just want customers. And now it's like, okay, well, they're clearly politically motivated and they're willing to potentially cause themselves legal and financial harm in order to harm someone that they simply don't like. And that's pretty scary if you ask me. I think it's a brave new world this week than it was last week.
Yeah, but in another, like if you put it in a different perspective, I think it's even positive in a way, you know, for BSV because like a lot of people are talking about the Streisand effect and also about this viral campaign, you know, I mean, the campaign is, I mean, the other camp, right? Like the camp against BSV, but it's going on actually. It's a campaign and I don't know. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to backfire somehow for them? Or, I mean, Float SV, we can see it on my screen. What do you think? How do you think it's going to play out?
Well, I mean, I think in the short term, they're going to keep congratulating each other. They're all excited. The fascinating thing to me is the Bitcoin cashers, you know, breaking bread with the Bitcoin core people about destroying Craig. And, you know, I've had to remind some of my Bitcoin Cash friends that like, hey, remember, you're the second most hated community in the Bitcoin world. So if we end up getting destroyed, you're the next on the chopping block, first of all. But as I look at the situation, we didn't see the order books get cleared out. Like we saw a dip, but was not like a colossal market crash even for the Bitcoin SV price either. And it also creates opportunity. Like I didn't want to do business with CZ from Binance. The guy is a crook. Like he's actually under investigation for receiving bribes to pump and dump and to list illegal ICO tokens. He's been kicked out of Hong Kong and Japan for securities violations. So,
I didn't know about Japan.
Right. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy who's actually got legal problems in the cryptosphere for, you know, potential fraud and securities violation, then furthermore going to, you know, accuse somebody else of the same thing. And I should preface, like, we don't know if Craig is Satoshi. He hasn't definitively proved it. You can have an opinion on it, but you can't outright call him a fraud without causing yourself trouble. He has a right to defend himself for being called a fraud just as much as you have the right to accuse him, but you can't just accuse somebody flippantly and just expect no blowback. So I think short term, they'll continue to shake each other's hands and act like they've won the war, but nothing changed. I mean, Bitcoin SV was not a heavily speculated upon coin. It didn't have a ton of trade volume anywhere. It's not a trader's chart. I do technical analysis for a living, and it's a junky chart to trade anyways. There's not a lot of volatility. So, I don't understand the weird crypto kumbaya that happened this week amongst all of these people that typically hate each other. And, here's the vacuum, and here's float SV to fill the void, right? It just creates opportunity.
Your partner also is a technical analyst as well, and
Yep.
has he told you anything about like what he sees in the chart of BSV? Just because I'm curious.
It's, you know what, the SV chart is a little too young to really call a trend. You need more data. I always say, like, people talk about the halvenings as bullish, and we always joke like there's only been 2 halvenings, and you can't spot a trend with 2 points of data. So it's kind of irresponsible to talk about the trend of BSV from a prediction standpoint anyways. I would argue that it's an oversold chart in a lot of technical ways, but it's also not in a place where it's had a lot of previous support either. We have not seen BSV maintain $55 as a zone, so we can't really say if is it at a place where it wants to be? Is there magnetism? Is there some kind of velocity to that number? It would be really irresponsible to speculate on the value right now. Mm-hmm.
So moving on, I want to talk about, what do you think are going to be the ramifications or the headlines when a judge says that either, Craig Wright was given the victory on this trial, or he lost the trial? What if he's declared, according to this judge, he actually says that, yeah, he has all the evidence to call himself Satoshi Nakamoto, and therefore he wins this trial? What do you think is going to happen?
His enemies will just say it doesn't matter, that it's insufficient proof, and everything you'd expect. I mean, we saw guys like Gavin Andresen and Jeff Garzik and Mike Hearn kicked out of Bitcoin Core because they were big blockers. They were not dumb. They were not untalented. They were not irresponsible. They were big blockers. And so they were removed from the narrative because they were big blockers.
I do think Craig is Satoshi. I met with him in London. He fits the kind of person that I was interacting with way back in 2010. And he provided some cryptographic proof using the private key from the very first Bitcoin block to show that he possessed that key. So although it's impossible to prove something like that 100%, I think for me, he's proved it beyond a reasonable doubt.
And it didn't matter it didn't matter that Gavin was given the keys by Satoshi, or that Jeff was the first guy to do ASIC mining, or that Mike Hearn was a brilliant coder, or any of that. Like, it immediately turned into, well, Luke Dash Jr. is the greatest coder that ever lived, and blah blah blah, and we're kicking all of you losers out. And I don't see any reason why it'd be any different now. I mean, Craig Wright is an enemy because he's a big blocker primarily. He believes in Bitcoin, and there's not money for insiders if you believe in Bitcoin working. They want to sell you something else. So, if I'm in the medical equipment economy, I want people to be hurt so that I can sell them things. And I think that's exactly what we've got here, especially from Bitcoin Core, but also from the other communities. I mean, I think there are some good legitimate projects that really are working hard. I think, if you look at like the Dash community or the Digibyte community, I don't think that they are scam projects. I don't think that they're going to win the long game, but I think the people there are developing and believe they have a real economic tool on their hands. I take them at their word. And I think all of them look at a healthy, vibrant Bitcoin that doesn't need them, and that's a threat. And I think Craig embodies that as a human. So I frankly, I don't know if he's Satoshi or not, and I really don't care. I never really cared. I agree with Craig about Bitcoin, and that was the whole conversation for me. But I'm way into ignoring identity politics as a rule too. Like, I don't care. I don't care where anybody's from or who they are or who their parents were. Or it just doesn't matter. I care where people are going, and I'm willing to go with you if we agree on where we're going together. And that's it. Period. End of sentence.
What do you think is going to be the reaction from the regulators when they actually start looking at this behavior?
It's a huge problem. I mean, we were supposed to have had a couple of ETFs by now, and Backed was supposed to be up and running, and everybody was going to be buying their coffee at Starbucks using whatever the heck Backed was supposed to be, which I don't know that was ever really clear, but
yeah.
But it's funny now looking back. Oh, and CBOE delisting BTC, by the way, which was actually a pretty quiet occurrence too. Like, regulators don't care. They're not here to pick a side. They're there to see if something has economic and commercial viability in order for them to offer it to be traded as an ETF or whatever else. And as much as people want to act like it's just this said and done deal that BTC is going to end up being the gold standard of the new economy, it doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense because, first of all, things that we've seen, I mean, we literally saw the CEO of Blockstream joining in with stuff like this. And then all these giant exchanges, and it's literally the whole existing crypto economy. And it's extremely unprofessional at the very least, but frankly, I think a lot of it is plainly illegal. Like it's market manipulation.
Yes.
What CZ did, I mean, he's front running, saying, "Oh, we're going to delist." Like, he starts with a threat on Twitter, and which already is illegal. Like, Elon Musk got kicked off the board at Tesla.
$20 million. He got fined $20 million.
Today, the SEC filed securities fraud charges against Elon Musk, the chairman and CEO of Tesla Motors, stemming from his August 7th, 2018 statements disseminated over Twitter that he was
right. And it's because his gravity in his market sways the value of his stock. It sways the value of other companies' stock. And, we saw the same thing. So then you look at, okay, who benefited and who was hurt? Well, as we saw Bitcoin SV drop 15-ish%, we saw Bitcoin Cash go up about 10 or 15%, while the rest of the market was also bleeding. So Bitcoin Cash, you could argue, benefited from the detriment. And then you can draw connections to, okay, who's financially connected here? And you can look at it. Kraken, for example, was started with some seed money from Roger Ver. And so they have a business connection that people are somewhat aware of, but I don't know how many people are aware that Roger and Jesse Powell are friends and all of that. But they're old school Bitcoiners, and I don't want to act like, they're sitting in a dark room, wringing their fingers together, but they have a business relationship, and that business relationship benefited the both of them this week because of a market collusion that was seemingly coordinated. And that's plainly illegal. Like, that is the kind of thing that would get executives removed and fined at the very least, and potentially put in jail, depending on how deep the roots go as to how far that collusion was planned out and to what end. Again, I don't want to threaten to put anybody in jail either, but in a standard market, it would just be understood that you're going to be paying a fine for what happened this last week.
Yeah, you can't be doing that. One thing I want to talk about before we finish is the death threats that Kevin Pham is getting now from Super Nerd. And what do you think about the cesspit that is, the crypto? Just closing thoughts about the whole thing.
Well, first of all, it breaks my heart. I was part of Reddit. I've had a Reddit account for a long time. I remember some of this toxicity at our Bitcoin and all of that too. And I was a big Roger Ver fan for a long time. He was one of the guys whose videos, for example, shoot, 5-6 years ago now got me interested in Bitcoin in the first place. And I look at it, I look at a guy like Super Nerd and stuff too, and like I roughly know who these people are. I wouldn't call us friends, or they may not even know who I am, but they were people who I respected because they were doing the groundwork, the footwork, and out there doing the evangelism and building businesses and stuff like that. And now I look at the toxicity, the vitriol that they have for disagreement, and I just plainly, it breaks my heart to see somebody who, first of all, is trying to show the world, like display the world that like an anarchist or a voluntarist worldview can work, because if we all have incentives to work together, we're all going to treat each other well and blah, blah, blah. And I don't necessarily disagree with that conceptually, but more and more they're proving how little they should be involved in such a world, because as soon as their ego gets pushed on a little bit, all of a sudden they're turning into that angry death mob that that has been talked about in theory for years. If there is no government, there's going to be angry mobs driving around hurting people, and an anarchist would say, "Oh, no, we're innately peaceful." Well, and except for when I actually get pushed, and then I'm threatening to kill Kevin Pham, right? And it's bad PR. It's bad karma. It's bad for the space. It's bad for whatever argument you want to make for a voluntary society. It's just, it's no good. It's immature, and people need to grow up and get back to business and do something of value, really. Like, why so sensitive?
Anyway, I want to talk about now a little bit about something else, which is the overall market. And I mean, what are the coins that you're watching now and you're interested in,
It's interesting. Like I'm a very conservative trader. So a lot of people think that traders are sitting in a computer, 10 monitors, and I've got bots doing all kinds of things. It's just really not how it is. Like, I look at things, first of all, I'm a fundamental analyst to start. So I'm looking for something that's going to have like actual fundamental catalysts and that kind of thing, which is why, again, I was in the Bitcoin Cash and now the Bitcoin SV communities. Those are very fundamental projects. Right now I'm actually looking to short Ethereum. So I think the markets look rough right now. I think they've grown over the past 4 months, pushing 5 months, in a way that's not sustainable. There's no real reason for it. We've seen the market go. Litecoin, for example, has gone up like 3.5 times. But has it gained 3.5 times as much utility as it had in December? Well, the answer is no. So I'd be looking personally to possibly enter short positions. But if you want to look at fundamentals, Brave and BAT is one of the only actual projects that's doing anything that's real. 99.9% of Ethereum tokens are illegal securities that don't do anything but pump money into developers' pockets. BAT is a coin that you can receive in order to interface with ads using the Brave browser ecosystem. I think it's a cool idea. I thought it was a cool idea, 2 years ago when they were in ICO. It was one of the only ones that stood out, one of the only ones that I ever even thought would be great. I didn't buy the ICO because I don't buy ICOs. I think they're a bad idea generally. But I think it's a cool project. And it's one of the ones, if you were holding through the bear market, you actually did quite well on. It was one of the only stable projects in the entire crypto economy during the bear market. It also lost value, but it maintained more value than most. So I'm not looking to buy more BAT now because it's already way up. But if you were in a position, I think we could see a breakout potentially, but it's a high risk and lower reward play. So I'm actually mostly flat right now. Like I'm like stable coin. My trading account, I'm almost all stable, like Tether or Fiat or whatever else. So I'm in one of those lulls because I was taking profits over the last couple of weeks, and now I'm looking to enter a short position probably, if anything, but I'm not actively in a trade at the moment. So we've interviewed Luke Mulks a couple of times on our channel.
Okay,
Uh,
from Brave.
from Brave. He's like I don't know his title exactly, but he's a technical guy, like development stuff. Over at Brave and Bat, which are both the same company basically. Um, and he's been great. He's a good guy. He wanted to develop the platform on Bitcoin 2 years ago. There wasn't a Bitcoin that worked 2 years ago for such a thing, so they had to check out Ethereum, and then they created their own token and everything else, and the rest is history. But he's been letting us know. He's been tweeting about it himself, talking about the ads program is going to launch. You'll finally be able to advertise. And the thing that I like the most about BAT is specifically that if you're in crypto business, which I am, I can't advertise on Facebook. I can't advertise on Twitter. I can't advertise on Google. Any advertising that I do has to be 100% organic, hit the streets. I have to have real relationships with people, and it's impossible to advertise on the internet. Well, Brave and Bat would allow me to run ads at the very least. So, and it's not piddly. Like the project actually has, I think the browser has something like 6 million active monthly users.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
This is not some like theoretical, hey guys, load the boat, this is going to be huge. Like there's millions of people using Brave browser every day. So it's a real thing they're working on until further notice.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I really like. And do you like EOS? I believe you don't hate it, right?
I was an EOS fan initially. I've become much more of a Bitcoin maximalist among the BSV stuff. EOS is interesting in a lot of ways, but I really, really dislike some of their governance issues. It was one that I liked initially. I liked a lot about the way they were setting up to run the network. And then they came out with the fact that we're going to have a couple layers of governance. So DPoS is their consensus mechanism. That has its own problems. I was really unhappy to hear that Bitfinex was going to use their customers' funds to become the main block producer on the network. So it's like basically a miner stealing electricity from everybody in order to mine. So that was kind of a negative for me. But their second layer of governance is actually that they have sort of like a constitution. Yeah. And then they have their own, like, let's say a Supreme Court, for lack of a better term. And then this group of arbitrators can roll back blocks and they can reverse transactions. And so the whole thing, like, I mean, it has some benefits, I suppose, but I think it causes more problems when you make your blockchain specifically political. So I'm a little less excited about EOS, especially in light of what I think BSV is capable of. I think it really invalidates a lot of what I thought was cool about Ethereum and Stellar and all these things a couple of years ago. I was very bullish on Ethereum 3 years ago. Now I look at it and say, oh, okay, Ethereum can't scale. Neither can half of the other things. But BSV is building ways to actually scale. So I've shifted over to the like long term. I think we will have one chain. And so that's kind of where my head's at across the board.
No, yeah, and I mean BSV. It's just I mean all of these things that on Ryder is doing, and I don't, half of the time I don't even know what he's doing, you know. But but there's some things that I like Bitstagram, you know, like that's a very interesting I guess approach to blockchain. Just put everything on the blockchain.
Sure.
And so let's close this interview with. What excites you the most about BSV, and what are you looking forward to launches? And I mean, we're going to have 2 gigabytes on July. So what do you think about all that? What excites you about it?
I'm excited about the stuff that we don't know about yet. You know, we know in theory what's possible with a blockchain, right? You know, we can just send more and more data for cheaper and cheaper, and that's all cool. But I'm excited for somebody to come up with like a mind-blowing new business idea that operates on this metanet layer that everybody's talking about. And if you give people tools, like that's the beauty of it, is that a free market will create things that you never heard of. One of my favorite quotes is from Henry Ford. And he says, if I would have asked the market what they want, they would have asked me to make them a faster horse. And you know, obviously that's not what he did. He built automobiles in a way that everybody could afford them. He came up with the production line, and he made it that everybody could afford a Model T. And then that changed the whole economy. So it wasn't that Henry Ford created, commuting and neighborhoods and all these different things, but the tool that he made allowed them to happen. And so I'm excited to see, a decade down the road, maybe I do everything that I do is on BSV, from social media to my all my business transactions to the way that I watch, TV or whatever else might all be operating from the blockchain. And so that's what really excites me. It's kind of that future Star Trek-y thing, and everything's on the blockchain. So I don't know if that's more, it's maybe a little too fanciful, but that is what I'm excited about,
it's
actually.
Long term, and that's your point of view. So that's good. It's a good investment strategy, to visualize things more in the long term. So do you want to invite people to your social media your website? Sure. And
yeah, and anybody that wants to learn more about what I do or what we do, cryptotraderspro.com. We sell an educational program for people to learn basically how trading and finance operates from a technical standpoint, to allow you to become a profitable trader. You can find me at Kurt Wuckert Jr. It's KurtWuckertJr. Basically everywhere. On Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Like I'm all of those places. And then anything from cryptotraderspro.com will link you to our businesses, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and everything else too. So I'm pretty easy to track down. Trying to gain more YouTube followers too. So please, if you could subscribe to the Crypto Traders YouTube channel, I'd appreciate that as well. And don't be afraid to shout out. I like talking to people, especially newcomers with questions. So don't be shy.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for coming.
For sure. I appreciate you having me on.